Hi, my name is John Goodman. This is the fourth video I'm recording on the new 2021 Real Estate Commission approved contract. We are talking about a new concept that has been added into the Real Estate Commission approved contract. It is the brand new, very first deadline in the new section 3.1 dates and deadlines chart. It is called the time of day deadline, and it could have been called when do brokers get to go to sleep deadline. Here's the cool thing about this deadline. It might allow real estate brokers to go to sleep later than midnight. So the way a scenario where this clause engages, where this concept engages, is imagine that you are the listing broker and you are involved in a transaction that was born on this date, day 0. There is an inspection objection deadline of day 10 and an inspection resolution deadline of day 13. And imagine the scenario where your seller has remorse about going under contract with this buyer. And the seller is looking for opportunities to get out of the contract. That can happen for a variety of reasons. You know, the seller just changes their mind. The seller doesn't want to move to Arizona anymore, or perhaps the seller has a backup offer that will net the seller $50,000 more for the property. You can pick whatever reason you want. Point is, in this situation, the seller has remorse and would like to get out of the contract. You know, as the listing broker, that the seller does not have the opportunity to, push an eject button and eject out of the contract. You know that all the seller can do is hope that the buyer shoots themselves in the foot, and through something like inspection objection or title objection or failing to diligently pursue the loan, needing more time, all the seller can do is hope that the buyer shoots themselves in the foot. Well, the seller's wishes are answered, sort of, because in this deal, the buyer submits an inspection objection. The buyer submits an inspection objection. And you, as the listing broker, get to convey the good news to the seller. Hey, the buyer submitted an inspection objection. And the seller says, hallelujah, this is the answer to my prayers. Great, let's stick a fork in this deal and move on. And you, as the listing broker, say to the seller, well, not so fast, because what gets started now is this 3-day game of chicken where we have the opportunity to negotiate these inspection items. And the seller says, but yeah, I'm not going to lift a finger to address the buyer's concerns. And you, as the listing broker, say, I get it, but the buyer has until day 13 to withdraw their objection. We cannot move on to the backup buyer, or we cannot unconditionally commit to the backup buyer until buyer number 1 goes away. So you don't call up buyer number 1 and say, we're not going to do jack, because that might induce buyer number 1 to withdraw their objection. You're not going to be fraudulent either. You're not going to string buyer number 1 along and mislead them, but you're going to be silent in response to that objection. Day 11 will go by, day 12 will go by, it's now day 13. Well, at what point in time, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, is it too late for the buyer to withdraw their objection? And that is what the time of day deadline is for, because what the Real Estate Commission approved contract has said for the recent past is the day ends at midnight. The buyer has until midnight to withdraw their objection. Well, that has now changed. And it's worthwhile taking a look at the language to show you how that's changed. So I am doing the share screen thing here. And here we are at the language. And let me zero in on it right here. Oh, that's not good zeroing in. There, that's better zeroing in. So we're looking at section 3.3.1 of the contract. And it says, day, as used in this contract, the term day means the entire day ending at 11:59. John, how come you told us we could change this? Well, we got to keep reading. Except, however, if a time of day deadline is specified in section 3.1, and let me just show you that. This is the section 3.1 chart there, row number 1, time of day deadline. So this is where you would put in whatever you put in, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Go back to the language. If a time of deadline is specified in section 3.1, all objection deadlines, all resolution deadlines, all examination deadlines, and all termination deadlines will end on the specified date at the specified day in the time of day deadline. So if you put in 5 o'clock, that day ends at 5. Well, John, how come you're giving us a video on this? Because that's as simple as it can be, but there's some complexity here. Notice that this language does not say all deadlines. It's specific. This time of day thing only applies to objection deadlines, resolution deadlines, examination deadlines, and termination deadlines. And you scratch your chin, well, how come they didn't say it applies to all deadlines? And I think, oh, great. Hopefully this is still recording. It says, hopefully, I'm sorry. It doesn't apply to all deadlines. And you say, why doesn't it apply to all deadlines, John? Well, I think one of the reasons is you can have some sympathy with the title industry, for example. They don't want to have to track, well, this contract has a time of day deadline of 4 o'clock, and this one has a time of day deadline of 7 o'clock. You know, we need to know when we need to get our title commitments out. So it does not apply to all deadlines. And a kind of deadline that it does not apply to is delivery deadlines. So if the title commitment is delivered at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock and the time of day deadline, I think that would be considered a timely delivery. Now, the more mundane and the more usual event that you will have is where the seller has remorse. The seller is trying to get out of the contract. The seller hopes the buyer shoots the buyer in the buyer's own foot. And the very oftentimes, the earliest opportunity for the buyer to shoot the buyer in their own foot is to fail to tender the earnest money on time. So well, there's an alternative earnest money deadline of say 3 days after MEC. And there is a time of day deadline of 5 o'clock. Is the buyer in default if the buyer fails to deliver their earnest money by 5 o'clock? I don't think so. So don't be too macho about this. Don't be too confident about this when you're on the seller side or when you're on the side asserting a default against the other side for being tardy, because you might not be right. The time of day deadline applies to a lot of the deadlines, the most important deadlines, but it doesn't apply to all of them. That's all I got, ladies and gentlemen. Remember my theme, it's a complicated world. Be careful out there.